Welcome to 6 Degrees of Purpose, a series in which Ollie and I explore the trends shaping our relationships with wealth, meaning and money. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube and some shorts on Instagram, or at thisis6.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback.
Today's guest is 16 years old, and he's already spotted something that most of us in this industry take years to understand, that being good with numbers and being financially literate are two completely different things. Aryan Vedhara is a sixth former at King's College School. He co-founded a climate movement before he was old enough to drive and built a podcast with over 200,000 streams. His latest venture is the Aspire Project, a 14-week financial education program and an app that he built with two friends because they noticed something important. School children can solve equations most adults have forgotten, but nobody's taught them about pensions, tax, mortgages, or their first paychecks. He's built a team of over 20 people to help him do this and to fix the gap, so let's find out why it matters enough for him to build it. Aryan Vedhara, welcome to 6 Degrees of Purpose.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to be here.
What drove you to create the Aspire Project?
It starts when I was about 12 and I was sort of exploring what I wanted to do for my GCSEs, and we had a really great talk at school about careers and about picking what you wanted to do in the future. And they said work backwards. So start where you want to be in 20, 30 years. What kind of careers could get you there? What kind of A-level university degrees could get you to those careers? What kind of A-levels could get you to those university careers? And what kind of GCSEs could get you to those A-levels? And I think as overwhelming as it was really helpful for someone who had absolutely no idea what they wanted to do. And so I think the first thing I did was I went onto TikTok and I opened up and searched luxury lifestyle at 30 or how to buy a boat at 30. And the big thing at the time, the big rage was software engineering. Everyone was going to San Francisco, not even going to university, getting recruited to go code for Google or Facebook or whatever that might be. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So I thought I'm going to pick everything based on that. And that's what I did. I picked computer science for my GCSEs, as well as geography. And I also picked TP because I found it quite interesting. And I was about halfway through when I remember ChatGPT first came out. And as amazing as it was for all my other homework, it could do my computer science homework in half the time and twice as good. And I think that freaked me out. I think I was very concerned about the fact that if it could already so early do work so much better than me when I'd spent so much time into it, I was very concerned about what sort of the sustainability of a job like that would look like. And I sort of decided that I've got to pivot. This might not be where I'm going to be in 20 years at this rate. So I decided, okay, what's the next logical step to buying a boat? I thought consulting at the time was the next logical step. So I decided researching into McKinsey, BCG, Bain. Mind you, I was 13, so I had no idea what a consultant actually did. So it was just mindless researching. And then I remember listening to a podcast actually with Stephen Bartlett, and he mentioned that the global managing partner for McKinsey had said they were going to cut their graduate intake by 50%. And I think that was another wake-up call, realizing that actually maybe this is not going to be here in 20 years. And then it was investment banking, and then it was private equity, and then it was quant trading. And I think as everyone happened, I started thinking, Jesus, this might not be here when I'm ready to go into the workplace. And that was pretty terrifying. And so I sort of started to think, well, how can I sort of future-proof myself? And if I'm feeling this with all the resources that I have, parents who've been so successful and are going to a school like that, then other people surely must be thinking the same thing. And so that's when I started my podcast, Building Resilient Futures. And that was all about sort of helping other young people to future-proof themselves for the future. And so we interviewed lots of great guests, and that was all about having conversations about leaders in fields all across the spectrum, about what actually does it take to have a successful and long-lasting career. And resilience was a theme that was sort of continuous. And as I continued that podcast, I sort of realized that actually as much as I'm enjoying this, I don't feel like I want to build something. I want to do something that actually sort of has that direct impact on people's lives. And I'd had some experience of sort of building things before. Sort of my first time building an app or something like that was called Greener World. I did it with a sort of best friend of mine at the time. I think we were about 11. We built a first prototype and then we sort of launched it, and then we sort of started getting a lot of publicity. So I'd had some experience of sort of building stuff before. And so I realized that that's what I wanted to do again, but sort of for this problem. And then I think sort of the game-changing moment was when I went to South Africa on a rugby tour. And that was sort of the most special week of my life, I think. And we spent a day at a township. We played rugby there. We had lunch there. And to see how happy they all were in such difficult circumstances was it was really warming. And I'm not someone who hasn't been around any of that. I mean, every time we go to India, we go to the orphanages, we go help out. My mum didn't come from very much, neither did my dad. So, I mean, I had been around that, but to see how happy they were and sort of how much they didn't care about their circumstances was like really warming. And I realized that actually I want to do something about sort of more on a global scale. And I came back to the UK and I grabbed a couple of my best friends all the time and said, okay, what can we start to do? And the first thing we started with was we decided that actually we're 16, we're not going to be able to, wipe out global poverty, but we can start in the UK. And what's the biggest lever you can pull? And it's education, in our opinion. So we started developing the Aspire project to provide practical skills and practical education for young people across the country, regardless of their level of privilege. And then that sort of developed. We started building tools for those courses, and then we sort of ended up piecing them together. And then now we are here now sort of with our consumer app just a few more months from launch.
It's amazing. I'm going to come back to the financial literacy piece, but I want to take you right back to one of the first things you said, Aryan, about you looked up on the internet what a luxury lifestyle would look like at age 30 and getting a boat. What drove you to think that that was the lifestyle you wanted age 30, and therefore you were going to take yourself all the way through the journey to get to that?
I think I was always someone who was quite driven by the idea of being successful, like not necessarily like in any specific sort of vertical, just the idea of sort of being like successful in itself. And so I think when you're 12, you don't see many different ways of being successful other than sort of from a financial standpoint. And I think even then I was always quite impact driven. And so I always dreamt of sort of being like, having a massive boat and a massive house and doing charity events all the time. And sort of that was like who I was. And so I think social media had such a profound impact in the sense that it gives you such exposure to the kind of things you can do at such a young age. I mean, I didn't think it would be possible to own a boat at 30. I mean, how many people in the world probably own a boat at 30? It's probably not many more than a couple of thousand. So I think the fact that social media gives you the opportunity to dream so high, I think that's definitely got to be part of it in some way.
And is that still the dream, given now you've had this profound impact of going to South Africa and seeing the township and wanting to create that financial literacy and wiping it out across the globe?
I want to build something that leaves a legacy. I think there's a really great talk I listened to, and I actually forgot who it's by, but they said that actually the most important thing is, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, is to build something that leaves a legacy, whether that's an app or a piece of code or a physical object. Is build something that's going to have an impact on people far after the business ends or far after you've solved the problem, if there's a problem to solve. And so I think that's probably what drives me is, I dream of revolutionizing the entire sort of like financial infrastructure. I mean, I think if I was to say what does 100% success like for Aspire, I mean, it's that you don't need to open your bank account ever again. You don't need your banking app. You only use that for transactions. I mean, from the age of 16, you might have a dream of retiring at 50 or owning a house by the time you're 35. And instead of being given random bits of advice by, all sorts of sort of random groups, it's all centralized within one app. And then as you sort of grow, and that takes you through a journey of being able to build, or not just from a financial standpoint, but from a career standpoint and working towards your goals. I think that then is something that motivates me. I think the idea of leaving sort of an app or leaving a legacy that people can continue to use long after sort of, Aspire finishes per se.
Now, it doesn't escape our attention that you've attracted a lot of interest from not just the media, but also from serious business leaders, people at the top of major global banks who are in the very centre of what we call sort of the UK financial establishment. What do you think it is about what you've built that's attracted such interest and attention?
I think the first thing is when we started developing the curriculum of what we wanted Aspire to be, we were very deliberate in saying that actually what specific things are going to have the biggest impact on young people's life. And I think you've got to go from right at the beginning and work backwards, and you've got to go absolutely granular. And so what we discovered is actually that it's not just young people, don't have some financial literacy. Is the actual basics of what they're given in the education system is lacking. I mean, our education system across the world actually is broken, and it doesn't work for the future. I mean, you have subjects like history and English where, Claude can write a better essay than most teachers can. I think that's extraordinary to even think about. But people don't know how to use Claude to do that, or people don't know how to use ChatGPT to do that. People don't know what's going to make that impact for themselves in 20 years. And so we were really deliberate in saying that actually what makes the biggest impact in our life, and what do we have that not everybody else has? If you look at the most successful people in the world, what do they have? What skills have they learned and picked up along the way that young people just aren't given? And so when we settled upon our 3 core themes of financial literacy, technological literacy, and AI skills, and then career readiness and awareness, I think we had done a lot of research into that, and it wasn't just sort of 3 things we'd picked out of a bag. And then I think the reason we were able to sort of get so much attention, not just from the media, but also from sort of like big figures in sort of banking. I mean, John Flint, former CEO of HSBC and the former CEO of National Wealth Fund. I spoke to him for sort of 45 minutes on a video call, and he was like, well, this sounds unbelievable. And so I think being young and understanding the very problem that sort of you're trying to solve makes a really big impact in sort of getting people's attention. I also think you've got to be really brave. I think you've got to sort of be willing to put yourself out there. So you come up with an idea, you do all the work for it, you do all the research. And I think people are starting to recognize now what a big problem it is, that young people just aren't being given sort of tools they need to sort of take them where they want to be. I mean, everyone wants to be able to live a life where they're not sort of stressed about money. Everyone wants to live a life where they feel like they're doing something. And so if we're not giving our young people the tools to feel like they can do that, I think people who've been through that system are going to feel motivated by that, and they're going to feel sort of a passion and an excitement about someone that's trying to fix that. So I think that's probably where we've been very lucky. I also think it's just been so brilliant being able to have some people just advocate for us. I mean, Ahana Banerjee has been like a mentor for me. I mean, I first had her on my podcast as my first guest, and then now she's a member of our advisory board. And it's having someone who can just say, just reach out to people, just do it. I mean, there's nothing you lose from someone not responding. And so I think that's such a huge thing as well.
What I find fascinating is the link between the financial literacy and the workplace literacy. I think I agree with you. Technology literacy, it's sort of, I think, perceived to be a given, but needs to grow. But the financial literacy, I think there's an assumption that children learn about finances at school. But what they learn is very different to what they need to know. They learn about the cost of things. They learn about potentially slightly inflation, but not about, for example, a pension, which is something that is fundamental when you go into a workplace. The first thing you're asked is, do you want to contribute to your pension? And most people probably don't even know what it is. So the combination of the two I find really interesting in how you are bringing this to life for those that need to learn, and everybody actually now. How do you do that in Aspire? How do you bring that to life for people?
So I think the most important thing to sort of that we focus on, and that I think people need to focus on, is that no aspect of your life is sort of singular. It's all very important to be linked together. Your career will affect where you are financially. Your finances will affect your ability to choose a career. I mean, you can't become a contractor or do something that has very spotty income sources without knowing that you're going to have to save more. You just can't do that. You need to understand where they link together. And I think a big fundamental gap in what we've had as a country, and I think as a society, is that we haven't had the input from the people who've done it into building those systems. And so I think, as someone who's sort of like tried to sort of navigate what I want to do in the future and how that would affect me from a financial standpoint, but also from a standpoint about what I'm actually doing in my day to day, I think I've sort of had a sort of very unique perspective in the sense that I've then done a bit of entrepreneurship. I mean, I've done a couple of internships in sort of the financial services space. I've done sort of work with some other startups. So I've had some sort of idea of what all these different spaces look like. And I think the effects that they have on each other is something that I think people don't recognize until it's too late. And so I think the most important thing for when you're sort of building sort of something that links two things that are so fundamentally interlinked, but seem so different, is by realizing at what points they link together. And I think that's where you have to start. So, for example, the first thing you'll obviously often do when you get your first job is you'll go through like your onboarding or your introduction or whatever that might be. And they'll sort of teach you a bit about what the company is like, and they'll give you, the IT rundown and all these things, which actually, in the grand scheme of things, mean little to nothing. In one, your ability to be successful in that job, and two, your ability to make the most of that job. And so I think to see immediately that that is where it's starting in the wrong place already, I think is really interesting. And so what it should be almost is that when you get into your first job, these are things they tell you, we will contribute up to 5% in your defined contribution benefit pension. If you donate to these charities, we will match your contributions to these charities. You get this much annual leave, but you can actually work these many days from home as well if you want. And so I think people need to be given, like, in the literal sense, everything they might need to know. I think assuming that people know stuff and know things that are sort of they're never taught is just a fundamental gap in, I think, our thinking as well. I think people think that sort of, I know this now because I've been through the process, so they'll have to work it out themselves. And I think that's a mistake in thinking. I think, if we want as a society to sort of boost growth as an economy, if we want people to be able to sort of live on their own and not be reliant on government or not be reliant on other people, if we want to sort of bring everyone up in society, we have to give them the tools to do so. And so I think that starts with letting people take control of their finances and giving them the tools to do that, and understanding how it links to what they're going to spend 80,000 hours of their life doing.
I love what you're saying, by the way, the convergence between sort of wellness, mental health, physical health, preemptive medicine. I think of like Dr. Rangan Chatterjee and his thoughts, and that convergence with financial health. I think that is something we're seeing happen, and I'm really encouraged to hear that that's part of the longer term plan, because I think it's a natural conclusion. I'm interested in the journey, right? So if I'm, or someone is a user of the app, for example, that's coming out soon, or who's been on the 14-week program that you originally designed, what does that actually look like?
Yeah. So I'll start with the program because it's a little bit simpler. It is 14 weeks. There is sort of 7 modules to it. The first module is something that was actually inspired by a sort of a former prime minister, Rishi Sunak and Akshata Murthy. Their work with the Richmond project is actually something that we've sort of taken as like a building block of what we want to do, is that actually numeracy is fundamental to what we're going to teach later in this course. So let's just start with it. Let's make sure everyone has that sort of building block. So that's what it starts with. It's a course in sort of how you can apply numeracy beyond just the classroom. So how can you use numeracy to, work out compound interest? How can you use it to work out inflation? How can you use it sort of in a spreadsheet, for example, to work out your budgets and costs? Percentages are like fundamental to sort of your entire financial life. And so seeing those practical applications of numeracy and maths is really important. And then second sort of module and lesson is all about writing and being able to write not just formally, but also informally, both in the workplace and in your life as you get older. You will have to write sort of very formal emails and letters, sort of either complaining about something or apologizing for something or asking for something, or you'll write a cold email asking for a coffee chat or whatever that might be. You will have to do a lot of writing, and being able to use AI tools in your writing effectively, but also write yourself and make an impact from what you're writing is really, really important. And so I think that's something that we focus on a lot in our session too. And then our next one is revision skills. And it sounds a little, dull, and it sounds like something you'd learn in school, but actually it's something that we think that a lot of schools don't teach. And it's something that's fundamental, not just to your school performance, but actually as you continue throughout your life, is the ability to learning how to learn. So whether you go to university or not, whether you first start a job, there will be a learning curve in whatever you're doing. And so being able to learn those things effectively is really important for that. So that's something that we touch on. And then we go into one of our core modules, and probably our biggest core module is all about financial literacy. And it starts right at the beginning. So what are the most fundamental basics that you need to know to sort of take control of your finances? So I get an income. What happens to my income? I'm supposed to be earning £40,000 a year. Why am I taking home £28,000 a year? So there's tax. How does tax work? You have your personal allowance. And then you have the different types of taxes. When you spend, you also pay a tax. When you buy a home, you pay a tax. And so learning how to understand where your money is going before you get it is the first and most fundamental part of taking control of your finances. The second is being able to control how you spend that money. And so being able to budget effectively is something that actually is sort of underrated, and actually really links to sort of being able to then invest and save. Is that actually, if you don't have the money to, how can you do that? And so learning how to use a spreadsheet for it. And we developed some really helpful tools. You just plug your income in and you estimate where you live and all of this stuff, and it pops out how much you should be spending or whatever that might be. It looks at your finances and sees sort of, this is where you're spending a bit too much, and sort of understanding how you can optimize and use deals. I think deals are something the younger generation does really, really well. I think the one that I see all the time is Uni Days. It's so good. There's deals for everything on it. And the amount of loyalty programs that all these companies have, you should be on all of them. You could save hundreds of pounds a month every single month by just every time thinking, I'm going to get coffee. I have a Starbucks card, which will save me 10%, or I have a Pret subscription that will get me 5 free coffees. Or I could just go to the one that's slightly closer. No, I'm going to walk 5 minutes further and save myself £5. You do that every day. That's a huge amount of money. And so all these little things that you're doing are really important. And that's what we sort of try and focus on. And then next is understanding what you do once you have a bit of money. And I think this is sort of something that people don't learn about because they think they'll never be in a situation where they'll have a bit of extra money. And so it's really important to think of it in sort of two ways. Thinking about yourself now, thinking about yourself in a few years, the short term, and then thinking about yourself in the future. So what do you want to do for yourself with your sort of extra money that you have?
What strikes me about this is that humans are different. No one person is the same. And we all have very different views, very different feelings, very often different ways of articulating ourselves. At the start of this, it sounds like actually being super aware of who you are and why you want to do whatever it is you want to do is fundamental, not only to the learning journey. So how do I write? How do I come across as my most authentic self for someone to want to reply to me? But also, who do I want to be in the future, and why do I want to have that amount of money? And how does that inform my decisions on what I want to do with it? Do you have a module that is around understanding myself before I go on this journey?
I think that's sort of where the app comes in.
Okay.
And I think I sort of hadn't touched on that yet, but the app is all about sort of where do you want to be in 30 years? I mean, that's the first thing you do when you open it out. It asks you, do you want to have a voice chat with Aspire, or do you want to text with it? Try and keep it as informal as possible. You press on voice chat and it says, hi, thank you for telling me your name and your date of birth, because you've done that in your sort of when you signed up. Can you just tell me a bit about what you dream of? I think that's the first thing, is what do you dream of? Do you dream of being someone who retires at, 45 on a big beach in Hawaii, sipping pina coladas all day? Is that what you want to do? Or are you someone who wants to keep working the whole time and is always engrossed in that sort of fast life?
And why? Why is such a fundamental question in there as well? Because what's driven you to do that? Who's been involved in that conversation?
And I think that's such an important part of sort of having sort of a really good environment around you, as well as not being sort of forced into a path. I mean, the next thing Aspire asks is, who do you live with? And it might seem really like sort of silly and trivial in comparison to what you've just asked of what are your dreams in life. But actually it makes such a big impact, because if you were fortunate to grow up in a house with 2 parents and a sibling, your sort of outlook on life is going to be a lot safer, and you're likely to take less risks versus someone who's might have grown up in a sort of a group home where there's so much difficulty going on around you that actually you're so much more likely to take a risk to try and get where you might be. And then sort of what you're done is you're asked about where you are now. So what are you doing now? I mean, what is going well for you in your life? What are you struggling with? What is stopping you from getting where you want to be? And you don't have to know the answers. It's just about sort of saying everything that you know and like sort of brain dumping like you would in revision.
This is to a large language model type.
Yes, so
chatbot.
So it's using sort of a Claude API, it's an Anthropic API.
Yep.
But actually what it does is our system prompts are actually proprietary. So we've developed prompts that actually engage the actual artificial intelligence in a way that no other sort of app has been able to do yet. And sort of sometimes people call it jailbreaking and manipulating the LLM to do exactly what you want to do. And that's the way we use our system prompts, is to make sure it gives a response that we want it to give. And that it's not just encouraging, but it's also honest and truthful, and it understands the full picture. And as you go through, it then asks you about your career, what you want to do in your career. Do you know what you want to do in your career? Are you doing your GCSEs now? If yes, what do you think you're going to get? What are you aiming to get? If you're doing your A-levels, the same sort of questions. If you're at university, sort of the similar sort of questions. And it's all about just it tries to get as big of a picture about you as it possibly can. And then after you've done that, it sort of opens up your app, and you get your lovely little dashboard and all your little things. And it sort of analyzes all that information, and it sort of works out, right, okay, let's say you said your goal was at 35, I want to own my own house in the UK. I want to own a property. I want to have a family, and I'll be able to send 2 kids to independent school. Let's say that's your goal. You've decided that. Because, your parents didn't get to do that for you, maybe, or your parents did get to do that for you, and that's what you want to do. And it will work backwards in saying that. So it'll know, for example, you're doing computer science for your GCSEs. I'm using my example again. And you're doing maths and you're doing further maths, let's say. It knows you're quantitative. It knows that's sort of the brain you have. So it works out careers that would match not just where you want to be, but where you're capable of being. And that's really important. Or for one of my friends who sort of has been one of our main sort of feedback givers early on, he hates maths. First opportunity, drop maths. I mean, he's doing history, theology and philosophy, I think English and geography, I think, as his 4 A-levels. I mean, all great subjects, but sort of not mathsy in the slightest. And for him, law might be the path that he might want to go down. Or he might want to go into project management. It doesn't matter. It sort of has the second largest database of careers in the UK of any platform in the UK. I mean, Unifrog has the largest. I mean, that's been going for like 30 years or something. So we have the second largest database of careers and industries. And so it works out, what does it match to? What does your skills match to? But also, will these careers take you where you want to be? Are you someone who wants to work at a desk 9 to 5 in London? Are you someone who wants to work from home? Are you someone who wants to travel on work? Do you want to work outside? Do you want a job that's physical? Do you want to work with kids? So it looks at all of these various factors and it matches you with something that takes you where you want to be.
And has it got the foresight to think about the jobs that don't exist yet? And what might, therefore, be something that you could do based on where the world might be in the future?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's hard for anyone to predict what it's going to be in the future. I mean, I talk to my friends in the sort of the school and as to sort of start doing career counseling and all of that stuff. And actually nobody knows what jobs are going to exist in the future. So I think what we're really sort of focused on is making sure you have the skills that sort of give you an opportunity to do all those jobs. So let's say, I don't know, it matches you to a vertical in property. You're really interested in property, real estate, property manager, whatever that might be. And so it's really important that you have skills that match that industry, because that industry is going to exist. Those specific jobs might not exist, but having skills within that industry is really important, and having general skills. So a big feature that we've spent a lot of time working on is Aspire Academy. And so it's an interactive sort of module which pulls courses depending on what your trajectory is. So let's say property is something you're really interested in and you've done those A-levels we just mentioned, and you're going to university and you're studying, I'm trying to think of something that someone might study, really random. You might study journalism, nothing to do with property, but you want to do that in the future. And so you're going to have gaps in your knowledge of certain bits because you're studying journalism. You're not studying something directly related to what you want to go in, and that's fine. Encourage that. Widen your sort of broad base. But then how can you build those skills? Well, you might need skills to evaluate how much a property's worth. You might need skills to sort of write a contract, to understand a contract, sort of understand negotiation, whatever those might be. And Aspire Academy creates artificial intelligence generated modules. So it gives you a video, a bit of text to read, some flashcards, all around that sort of knowledge base. And then you do a little quiz. You have a little chat about anything you got wrong, or you didn't understand. You do another quiz, and then sort of helps you sort of match towards your skills, match your actual career and where you want to be. And so what we've done, and sort of the whole thesis of what we're doing, is trying to build something that not just links every aspect of your life, but optimizes every single aspect. And so if I touch briefly on sort of the finance part of the app and the money part of the app, I think it's something that I'm really passionate about, is making sure people have the tools and the sort of knowledge to sort of be successful with their own finances. And the first step is, like we said, is optimizing what's going out. And so what it does is it'll look at all your expenditure. You connect your bank accounts, duplicate expenses. Let's say you're spending Netflix twice, or let's say you have Amazon Prime and you're also paying for Delivery Plus, right? But you actually get Delivery Plus as part of Amazon Prime. It knows that. So it says, actually, you cut these two subscriptions, you'll save £17 a month. The best place for you to redirect that, because you want to buy a house one day, is a Lifetime ISA. Well, for now, it's a Lifetime ISA. Or whatever that might be. And then what it also does is it compares your spending against its database of deals. And that's something that I mentioned earlier. Deals are great. I mean, use deals. So we have a massive database of deals, which we're constantly scraping and updating, and says, let's say you're spending, I don't know, £15 a month on a Starbucks membership. I don't know how much Starbucks membership is, to be honest. Let's say there's a student discount that gets you 30% off that. And so now you're saving, I don't know, £4 on your Starbucks membership every month. And you do that for, let's say, 3 or 4 things. And that's another 12, 16, 20, £24 every month that you can save. And you keep doing that, and you keep redirecting that into the most sort of optimized place for yourself. And it gives you the most, gives you the biggest jump in sort of where you would have been to where you are now. Let's say your goal was at 35, I want to buy a house. You were on track to buy it at 38 because of, where you were going now, and that's fine. But now actually you're on track to buy it 2 years early, just because you've continuously made lots of small savings. And it's about giving every single person the sort of opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that sort of journeys.
It's absolutely fascinating. It's something that it feels like you've designed something that you would have really appreciated when you're 11 and mapping out your life. How do you measure success?
Success for Aspire is sort of in 2 fronts. I think we designed it originally as sort of a CIC, a community interest company, delivering those courses for free and having a real positive impact and not making any money from that. That just being absolutely social impact. And then building the limited company and the app, which is absolutely a for-profit business. I mean, businesses need to make money or they can't sustain themselves. But actually, it's still doing good while doing that. And so having that dual entity makes it really easy for us to define 2 sort of goals. And I think the first goal I think we're already part of the way there. It's something that we've been campaigning for, is financial literacy to be in the curriculum. They've added it in 2028, and that is a massive step forward. And I think everyone would recognize that. But actually, we're not satisfied because it's not enough. It's a very basic curriculum. It was designed by academics, not by people in the industry. It doesn't include investing. It only includes budgeting, inflation, includes the most basic things that actually aren't going to make the biggest impact on you in the future. And so if that curriculum isn't going to change as fast as we want it to change, then you've got to be on the outside looking in. You've got to push into it. And so that's how sort of what we aim to do with the school sort of program, is that actually our program does encapsulate the 2028 curriculum. So if schools don't have the sort of resources to teach it themselves, they can outsource it for free. And Aspire will come in and deliver that 2028 curriculum. But you're not just going to get that 2028 curriculum. You're going to get the entire 14-week journey, including numeracy, writing, revision skills, financial literacy. You're going to get AI skills and technology. You're going to get career readiness. You're going to get their entire suite. And actually, you're going to get it at no cost. So I think sort of our goal would be, I mean, it sounds crazy, but have it in every school across the country, whether it's delivered by us or deliver it by partners that we sort of work with. So let's say, I don't know, you go to a state school, you deliver the program by another independent school, and now you've been through the program, you might then lead sort of the next iteration of it. You might then go out and teach another school as you get older. And so it's continuing and having that spread very organically throughout the country would be sort of a goal or a dream, you could say. And then I think the other thing would be sort of get the app in as many people's hands as possible. I think it gives people such a profound sort of positive advantage, actually, to be able to sort of map out where you want to be and to optimize every single aspect of your life to get there is something that very few people have right now. It's sort of limited to the people with the most privilege. And actually, if our app is sort of designed to be free, it will be free for everyone. There will be a pro feature because it has to make money, but actually all the key features that everyone will need are in that free module, and everyone will get 12 months for free. I mean, we've made that absolutely clear. If you've been through the Aspire program, which we hope that everyone will have been, you'll get 50% lifetime off. So, if your entire life, you'll be able to get 50% off, as well as 12 months for free. And so I think as many people as we can get it in the hands of as possible is the bigger impact we can get. And we've been really fortunate for the Times to have picked it up. And that really helps sort of bolster the message. I mean, their campaign with Smarter with Money, I think it was obviously excellent. I mean, that's something that needs to happen more of. The FT does one. I mean, Claire Barrett from the FT is obviously a huge voice on financial literacy. Louise Hill, founder of GoHenry, is a big outspoken voice on financial literacy. And there's lots of great people doing it. And that's really important. But what we've always sort of believed is there isn't enough collaboration within it. And everyone wants to be the one who's the one doing it. And that's something that we sort of fundamentally disagree with. That actually the most important thing is actually there's one system which encapsulates all of this. And we've written to sort of all the major party leaders in Westminster and the relevant people. So we've written to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of State for Education. We've written to the Shadow Secretary of State for Education and the Shadow Chancellor and the Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury. We've written to sort of the leader of the Liberal Democrats. We've written to the Education Spokesman for Reform and the Treasury Spokesman for Reform. So we've written to a really wide majority of parties saying, what would you commit to if you were in government? Or you're in government, what would you commit to sort of furthering financial literacy, opportunity for young people? And we've been disappointed not to get the response that we would have hoped for. And I think this is something that everyone agrees with. Equality of opportunity is something that everyone from across the spectrum believes in, no matter what you believe. I think that's sort of something that everyone's settled on now. But I think not everyone, I think nobody actually has sort of understood what that means. Is that's not sort of equalization in every sense. That's not sort of taking from one person. That's none of that. It's actually just giving everyone the education and the tools they need. And I think that's where sort of Aspire sort of aims and dreams to be, is to actually be the leveler for society. Is, from a financial standpoint, you'll feel so much better if you do it yourself. I mean, I refuse to take my parents' help, as much to their dismay. I want to do it myself. Yeah. And it feels so much more rewarding when you do that. And I think if we give everyone the tools to be able to do it themselves, I think that would be such a great goal that we could strive towards.
And of course, we focus a lot on sort of the younger generation, but there's still that gap. Actually, even we meet entrepreneurs today that would still have that lack of knowledge or understanding. And so there's something around bridging the university upwards to sort of 30, even 40, even 50, and their understanding, because we see now companies that are creating wellbeing around payroll, around HR, and we see individuals, of course, selling businesses, but not knowing what to do with the proceeds after that. How do we bridge that gap? How do we enhance financial literacy? And also, we haven't touched on it as much, but the technological literacy for actually everybody that is missing that.
I think it's a really interesting point, and I think it's something that we've sort of talked about a lot. That actually there is a huge gap with people at university currently, and much older than that. I think my granddad, I was speaking to him the other day on the phone. He's 94. He's very much not from sort of the younger generation. He struggles with his phone. He struggles with sort of understanding, sort of like his sort of work came to the UK when he was 16. He's worked really hard, came in with like £2 in his pocket, and now has sort of a couple of rental properties in Newcastle, and he just cannot manage it anymore. And so I think, actually, you're right, it is everyone across the spectrum. But I think it starts at the beginning. Because I think if everyone is taught it when they're 16, that actually then everyone will have it when they're 50 and 60 and 70 or whenever. And I understand that there might be a gap then in between, when sort of while you're giving it to everyone when they're 16, what about the people who are 50 right now? I think that's a sort of very, very prevalent point. And I think that's where Aspire, the app, comes in more so. I think it really works for anyone at any age. I was testing that with my parents yesterday, and sort of my mum and my dad are both much older. And sort of they use it, and they're sort of learning stuff while using it. They're using the Aspire Academy and learning bits about, what is an LLM, what actually is it, how does it work, where might AI go in the future, how to apply AI in your life, and they're learning about that as well. So I think from an education standpoint, you have to start at the beginning, because delivering a program to everyone in the country would be impossible, from a practical point. But delivering it to every young person in the country, it would be difficult, but it is possible. And to me, it seems it still feels like something to aspire towards.
The conversation spanned quite a broad spectrum, and it's fascinating for us to hear what you're working on, because this is something very close to our hearts. We talk very much about the taboo of wealth in the UK, and we think that's born out of a lack of financial literacy at younger ages, and that's not the case in other countries, for example. So you're solving something that's deeply, I think, important. And we often close by asking people what advice they would give to their younger selves. But I'm going to flip it round and say, for the Aryan at 30 years old, what do you know now that you really hope he holds on to?
I think that's a great question. I think being open to sort of pivoting, I think it's sort of something that I've learned and I've sort of been able to bring on. I think, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I think we've had, since I founded Greener World the very first time, I've built 3 other apps since then, not including Aspire. One died before even its alpha test. The next one, I did its alpha test, then it died. Then I did a beta test for one, and then it died. And so I think being willing to fail and sort of do these, sort of experiment with it, doesn't work, fine, you pivot it into something else, is really important, because I think that's how you build something that works. That's how you build something that not just has product market fit, but actually has an impact and is affecting people's life, because actually people have used it, have gone, yeah, I like this little bit, but it's not really working, or I love this is working for me. And I think being able to find that and being able to find that impact through being open to pivot, I think is really, really important. And I think that's something that I would hope that I can hold close the next sort of 20 years.
Aryan, thank you for such an amazing conversation. I think there's a lot that people can learn from what you're doing, and hopefully from using Aspire.
Thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you both.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.